Welcome to Question Time. Tonight we're in Romford. On tonight's panel, Mims Davies, the government's employment minister under former minister under Theresa May. Jonathan Ashworth, Labour's shadow work and pension secretary and shadow health secretary throughout the COVID pandemic. Leader of the Liberal Democrats for nearly 2 years and former energy and climate change secretary in the Lib Dem Conservative coalition government, Ed Davey. Camilla Tominey, journalist and broadcaster and associate editor at the Daily Telegraph, and entrepreneur and youngest ever winner of the Queen's Award for Enterprise Promotion. He began with a business model for school tuck shops and now works with companies such as Google and Barclays training young entrepreneurs. Bejay Mulenga. Good evening. Welcome to the panel. Welcome to our audience joining us here in Romford. Great to see you. And of course, welcome to you at home. Thank you for joining us and joining the conversation in the usual way on social media at BBC Question Time. Let's hear what you've got to say. OK, our first question tonight is from Jamie Howells.
Is it now time to move on from the Partygate saga and focus on issues that matter to people, such as the cost of living crisis?
What do you think?
I think that it's time now to move on. Boris Johnson has apologised to the House of Commons for what he did. I think that there's more important issues to worry about, such as obviously the war in Ukraine, which I think that the government's handling very well. And I think that when it comes to voting in elections, it won't be based on whether Boris Johnson ate a piece of cake at his birthday or not. It'll be on the bread and butter issues that people like me actually care about.
How interesting. As soon as you finish that sentence, lots of hands shot up. But before I come to you, let's just hear from a couple of people on the panel. John.
I think the cost of living crisis is the most important issue in the country at the moment. And the reason I say that is I spent a lot of time going around the country talking to people, talking and listening to pensioners who are struggling because the government have just imposed the biggest real terms cut in the pension for 50 years. I talk to parents who are in work but cannot afford to make ends meet and are picking up a food parcel on their way home from a shift and are making choices between feeding the meter or feeding the children.
But the question, is it time to move on from going on about Partygate? And there's been discussion within the Labour Party about that.
Well, I believe the two issues are connected in this respect. Boris Johnson and his Conservative MPs are so mired in these different scandals. Conservative MPs are so preoccupied with whether Boris Johnson survives as Tory leader, whether Rishi Sunak can get his political career up and running again, and are completely disconnected with the needs of the British people, therefore. Let me give you an example. People are really struggling now with the heating bills that have gone up. They're struggling with Rishi Sunak's big punishing tax rises, with the deep severe cuts to universal credit. And yesterday, Rishi Sunak said it would be silly to help people with those energy bills. Silly. When I've heard stories of pensioners picking up blankets from food banks because they cannot afford their gas and electric bills, when families are making choices between feeding their meters and feeding their children. Rishi Sunak dismisses those concerns as silly, and it's because we have a government so utterly mired and preoccupied with these Partygate scandals that they cannot focus on the needs of the British people.
My only point was going to be that Labour's been preoccupied with it as well. I mean, we had Keir Starmer having that debate and having in Parliament when it had already been decided, hadn't it? The Conservatives had already dropped that motion. So it was kind of like this idea that the Westminster bubble is caught up in this. And as Jamie has pointed out, I mean, most people have moved on from COVID generally. You can have a debate about the idiocy of the rules in the first place and the fact that the police really had no place at all trying to police our social lives during the pandemic. And actually, if the Prime Minister's been hoisted by that illiberal petard, then so be it. He'll be judged at the ballot box on the May elections. He'll be judged in 2024. He may even, before then, be judged by his own Tory MPs. But as far as all of our priorities are concerned, I think now, more than 2 years on from the first lockdown, we're probably all rather over it.
Well, let's hear if you are. The man there in the glasses.
Yeah, I'm would agree the cost of living is so important, especially when we look at people with disabilities and everything like that. But I think fundamentally the issue here is if I did something wrong in my job, I would be chastised for it or I would be asked to leave. Yet someone is not auditing this, or they have audited it and we're not allowed to see what that was actually said. And I think that's why people are not over it, because we all gave so much during that period. People were left alone and weren't able to see loved ones and didn't get to say goodbye, and that's the issue. There is no kind of, we listened, we did what we was told to do, but you decided to do something different. We didn't change the rules.
The man behind you.
Johnson's a proven liar. How can we trust him handling all the problems in the future?
Okay. The woman there in the glasses. Yes, you with the glasses.
There's no integrity, like the gentleman's just said. How can we trust? We're a laughingstock internationally. It's, people sacrificed everything. And I think MPs that support Boris Johnson for what he's done they're no better.
Okay. The man behind you in the suit. The man in the white shirt and blue jacket.
I think it is time to move on, and I think the reason people get so upset about it at home is because how the opposition talk about it so much and bring it up and trying to find any reason to attack the government on character rather than policy. And really, Labour should be spending more time trying to give good policy and try and influence good policies rather than going after characters.
Okay. Well, the man here in front in the very natty hat, if I may say.
Lovely hat. I think the first thing that we have to realise is that attitude is a reflection of leadership. So when you see somebody like Boris Johnson, who's our leader, acting in a certain way, then it reflects on all of us. We then look at each other and we say, well, why were we doing what we were told to do when the person who's supposed to be making these rules and these regulations, who's supposed to follow these rules and regulations, is the one who's actually breaking them? That doesn't give us any confidence in what he does, whether it's policy or anything going forward.
Okay, the man there in the blue sweater.
I think people have forgotten that Boris acted very quickly to bring in the vaccine, and we were miles ahead of the EU, and 1 year later he's being criticised over a party, and really they weren't even proper parties, they were just gatherings with cake and a drink. So why has the country turned on Boris when he actually delivered the vaccine? We were 6 months ahead of the EU, it saved thousands of lives, and the public have turned on him, so for no reason.
Okay. Bejay, is it time to move on? Is it time to move on from Partygate?
I think the people will decide. I think Camilla made a great point. We've got the opportunity to vote in May. MPs who are here, you're kind of promoting yourselves because there is a by-election next week, Thursday.
Well, there's a local council election next week, yes.
Yeah, local election next week. The question around moving away, I think we need to always look at the sentiment of the people. We can kind of debate about whether Boris is in or out as people in groups, but the way I like to move as an entrepreneur and as a leader myself is I like to move with principles. And for me, we have to look at the values that we hold our leaders by. Being Prime Minister is one of the highest positions, and in that level, integrity is very important to me, and I know it's important to a lot of people. We heard it in the audience. We know values that we run ourselves to be very important. I personally had 2 uncles who passed away from COVID in 2020. Couldn't go to the funeral. I attended multiple Zoom funerals. These emotions are still very real for a lot of people in society. So there needs to be a real accountability.
What do you think should happen?
Real accountability. And by real accountability, I mean, if there needs to be another election, if there needs to be a vote of no confidence from the people, and a mandatory, one of my frustrations is the fact that voter turnout has kind of gone up and down over the years. In other countries, they got mandatory voting, In this country, we have a government ran where the whole population hasn't voted, essentially. And if we're going to have a leader, we need to always understand that the margins of error are very low, and the people need to back the leader that we have. And for me and many people in my community, I have to say that faith has been lost recently.
Okay. Mims, so the question is it time to move on from Partygate and focus on other issues? You've heard both views represented here.
And as we've heard, there are local elections coming up, so people are on the doorstep listening and hearing what people say. I was nearby in Crawley over the weekend. I'll be out over the next couple of weeks listening and hearing from people. And there is a mixed view. You know, there are people...
Well, there's a mixed view within your own party. You've got Jacob Rees-Mogg saying it's the disproportionate fluff of politics. And you've got Steve Baker, senior backbencher, saying the gig's up for the Prime Minister.
And I was there when Steve said that.
Were you shocked?
You know, he was one of Boris's biggest fans. But people are absolutely accepting of the apology or not. And it depends where their stance is. But I've accepted the apology, but I've been critical, and I'm very keen to see why this has been allowed to happen and what happened. And I've been very pleased to see the changes, because we had to see the changes. But on the doorsteps, talking to people or hearing from people, it is about cost of living, but they're also very thankful they've got their businesses, their homes, their livelihoods, because of the interventions of furlough, because of SACE. In terms of cost of living, coming forward, we've got £22 billion of interventions, including in the spring statement another £500 million to help people with vulnerabilities and disablement. And of course we've got a jobs miracle. I would say that, of course, I must. As the,
what do you mean by the jobs miracle?
Well, we've got 1.3 million vacancies, and if you move...
But you've got fewer people in employment now, if you include the self-employed, than before the pandemic. Which, of course, you know as Employment Minister.
But there's more people on payrolls, and we're going in the right direction.
Yes, but that doesn't include the self-employed.
But there's more people going into work who are younger. 162,000 young people have gone into work because of the Kickstart programme, getting their first chance into employment despite the COVID impact in some key sectors where we really need people. So
Why are they going to food banks then?
The reality is, Jonathan, that the changes to the universal credit, taper rate, work allowance and the rise in the national living wage, if you move from being out of work into work, you could be £6,000 better off. And I say to anybody listening or worrying about their relatives or about their money in their pocket, please check the benefits calculator on .gov.uk and talk to your local authority about the household support fund. There's £500 million extra there. £1 billion worth of help, and people will be starting to see, like in my constituency, the rebates on the council tax and other interventions.
And I'm going to come to you in a minute, but I noticed quite a strong reaction from you at the back there.
I think in terms of moving on from Partygate, we could do that. Shall we move on to Care Home Gate? Because there seems to be limitless opportunities to get angry at Tories for breaking laws during COVID.
OK, we'll just park that thought for a moment. Ed, do you want to answer the general question, is it time to move on from Partygate and focus on other issues, such as the cost of living crisis?
Jamie, we could move on if the Prime Minister did a decent thing and resigned. or if Tory MPs did a decent thing and sacked him. I was listening to what the audience said, and I was really taken by a few people who said that trust has been broken in our politics, that people don't have confidence in the Prime Minister. And this is really serious, because we have not just a cost of living crisis, we have a cost of living emergency. There are millions of pensioners and families who are in serious trouble already. We have a Chancellor who says it would be silly to help them. I'm sorry, Rishi Sunak, you need to help them now.
So, Ed, do you have to apologise for getting your statement of interest to the House of Commons wrong? You apologise. That was accepted. You were taking money for a second job. You said sorry because you didn't raise that in your register of interest. Why should we accept your apology and not other people's?
I'm sorry.
But please explain. Well, I'm sure the listeners and
let's let Ed
be
explain.
Interested.
Because you got it completely wrong. I did have 2 second jobs. They're completely declared in the normal way. I gave them up. Tory MPs haven't given them up. So I'm afraid it's Conservative MPs
but what
again
about those
have
questions
to answer.
that you didn't declare your interest in?
Well, there was one question.
Yes, but you're asking other people who've got it wrong to resign.
Hang on.
Yes,
You're making a point, but let's let Ed answer.
Because there are different things. And I think breaking the rules that you wrote is extremely serious. There are... And then, I don't know how you dare look your constituents in the face. Those constituents who obeyed the rules and weren't able to be with their loved ones when they died, weren't able to attend those funerals. But it was all right for Boris Johnson to attend his parties. That is unacceptable, and Conservative MPs like you should sack him. And I'll tell you what. Ukraine is serious, Jamie. And I support the government in giving arms to the Ukrainian army. But what I don't support the government on that serious matter is that they failed to sanction Putin's cronies, some of whom are giving money to the Conservative Party. And I'll tell you the other thing that they're failing on with Ukraine. They're failing to help those Ukrainian refugees, those mothers and grandmothers with their children escaping Putin's bombs. I went to the border between Ukraine and Poland. Through an interpreter, I spoke to about 20 refugee families. It was the most humbling experience of my life. And the Conservatives are putting paperwork in the way, bureaucracy in the way of helping those mothers and children, and that is a disgrace. The British people are compassionate and generous. They want to welcome them. The Conservative government is stopping that.
86,000 visas have been granted.
You know, you'd never think there was a local council election next week, would you? Anyway, including... Hang on, Mims. Including... Hang on, Mims. OK. Including here in Havering. Jamie, you asked this question. What do you think of what you've heard?
Well, I agree with what Mims was saying, to be honest, in general. I think what it shows that by Boris Johnson breaking the rules was that they were absurd in the first place, and that we should never have gone into lockdown. And that it was the biggest mistake, I think, that the government has made, because we now have a mental health crisis, we now have children who have to catch up on their lost learning, and we have NHS backlogs of over 6 million people, and we have cancer patients who can't get seen, who died during lockdown. No one talks about that. Why are we not talking about the collateral damage from 2 years of lockdowns, which have destroyed the economy and which have caused the cost of living crisis that's happened today?
OK. Jamie, thank you for that. In terms of the questions we're asking here tonight, obviously they're dictated by the questions that you have submitted, but I hear what you have to say. Before we move on to our next question, I just want to tell you where we're going to be next week. So next week, the programme will be coming from Walsall, where we'll be joined by screenwriter and playwright Jack Thorne, who's written Hollywood movies, many TV dramas, including most recently the care home TV drama Help. The following week, on May the 12th, we're in Hackney in London, and on the panel we'll have the TV personal finance guru Martin Lewis, so we'll hear what he's got to say. So if you'd like to be in either audience, Walsall or Hackney, go to the Question Time website and you can follow the instructions there, and we'd love to see you, of course. Right, let's take another question now from Sue Kimchi.
Hello. In light of the reports of a backbencher watching porn on their mobile and other sexual misdemeanours, is it time for the House of Commons to overhaul their treatment of an attitude towards women?
Camilla.
Sue, I mean, it's a great question. I'm still absolutely baffled and bewildered as to why an MP thought it was appropriate to watch porn in the House of Commons. I mean, I'm not such a shrinking violet.
We know those debates can get very boring, but they generally resort to Candy Crush, as far as I've seen, from what you can see on House of Commons TV. It's just extraordinary.
And I think there's been a couple of witnesses. Look, we don't have the full facts. You're obviously also, I think, Sue, probably referring to the story about Angela Rayner this week, a so-called skirt gate. There was also a report in the Sunday Times that kind of got buried amid the hysteria over, you know, the Sharon Stone thing, that 56 MPs are still under investigation for sexual misconduct. So what we're trying to ask ourselves is Westminster a sort of microcosm for the wider world? Look, I think misogyny exists everywhere, and unfortunately it does still exist in our political system. I am sometimes rather cautious about sort of trying to tar everyone with the same brush. Just because somebody may have been caught watching porn in the House of Commons doesn't mean that the House of Commons is full of people who would behave equally as inappropriately. I know a lot of MPs, including on this table, that are very decent people who want to serve their constituents well. But in general, the issue of misogyny still bothers me, that I might not be paid as much as a male counterpart. So it's 2022 and there's still a gender pay gap. That bothers me, and that suggests, along with everything that's happened in recent weeks in Westminster, that women are still on the back foot.
Mims, what's your response to the question? And have you experienced sexism and misogyny as an MP in the House of Commons?
Well, firstly, let me say, I think we're all absolutely flabbergasted by this, and it's absolutely right that it's going through the independent complaints and grievance process, which has been set up to cover some of the points that we've heard. And it's absolutely right that all of us, in whatever workplace, are safe and are supported and looked after, male, female, whoever. And in fact, for International Women's Day, we actually signed the ILO Convention on protecting women in the workplace and making sure that violence was absolutely, we were one of the signatories, and I was very proud to do that along with my Secretary of State for DWP. And it is flabbergasting, and it reflects extraordinarily badly on all of us. Now, clearly somebody needs to be looked at, see what's going on. This is incredibly, horrible, misogynist, risky behaviour. It belies, obviously, a problem. Now, this job will find a fault line in you in some way, shape or form. If you've got any particular issue, it will rise to the top, whether it's a family issue. But clearly, we need people in this position of privilege and responsibility to take that very seriously. And when it goes wrong, and if we find out who it is and they are found to be doing this, take the whip away and let their constituents deal with them. That's absolutely the right thing. But what really frustrates me is I'm an MP, I'm not a female MP. We don't label, I'm fed up with being labelled as a particular type of MP. And actually, as MPs, we've done incredible work on female issues, menopause support in employment. We've actually had some brilliant bills going through in this Parliament, the Tackling Domestic Abuse Bill and other interventions. But I'm afraid our press is unable to report on this, and it never gets the light shone on it, on the good work that we do cross-party, when it's continuous, the bad behaviour which gets the light that's shone on it. So I'll ask Camilla and people in the positions who can highlight what they're doing. So, for example, my Kickstart programme with 162,000 young lives has barely got a mention. I'd love people to actually cover the work we do, but we have to not
expect
give
people
them...
not to mention if an
but I'm
MP of
saying
any party was found to be looking at porn in the House of Commons.
Absolutely, but I'm saying that's why we would clear out the stables and sort this out, because I want people to trust us and see the good work that we're doing, changing people's lives. And they'll never do that if we can't get this sorted out.
Mims, just on the media, it's a bit harsh. I mean, we're highlighting all of these issues. We've done a hell of a lot of work on women in violence, rape, conviction rates. The Telegraph has run a duty of care campaign about children online. It's run a campaign to champion women in industry post-pandemic, because we feel that female entrepreneurs, particularly Bejay, have been the worst hit by coronavirus. So hang on a minute. Yeah, you're going to have a story like this and it's going to run and run. It's a marmalade dropper that everybody here is talking about.
Exactly, but Angela Rayner and the sexism and everything about basic instinct is not how we want our politics covered. We want the work that we do as MPs, and we've got to fix this so that we see it as a whole. I think we're really agreeing.
Yeah. Woman here in the glasses.
Do you not think, though, that these isolated incidents just speak to an attitude of misogyny that perhaps then is in Westminster, but then feeds down to the whole of society? For example, there's a massive HRT crisis. If there were more women in Parliament, would that be happening? Or, on the other side, if men were affected by the menopause, would this be happening? Issues which affect women, yes, you're saying perhaps they're not picked up in the media, but beyond that, are they actually picked up in Parliament in the way they really deserve to be?
Yeah, the menopause task force is really good, important.
Mims,
I agree.
Can I let you dominate the whole panel? The man here in the black shirt.
Politicians are public servants. They're supposed to be authentic, they're supposed to be accountable. Are we really seeing that accountability right now?
OK, the man in the blue at the back.
I think this feeds into the whole issue of the loss of morality in the current government. I mean, when you've got a leader that smirks and lies to the public and lies to Parliament, and then tries to cover up the Owen Paterson debacle, and then you've got the thing with Claire Rayner going on. Is it surprising that Angela Rayner? Sorry, is it surprising that people in his party think they can get away with things that you wouldn't expect to normally happen in society? There's just a loss of morals and standards in Parliament in general.
Okay, in the white shirt, you're shaking your head and disagreeing there.
I'm not sure how you can blame Boris for someone else watching something inappropriate, but people do. Personally, I don't think it's the right thing to do. It's the wrong thing to do, but it's not illegal, right? But what concerns me is the 56 people. I'm not defending it, but the 56 people that have been investigated.
I'm not. Someone correct me. It may be. I mean, there are laws about public decency and what have you. So it may be. I can't say
but
for
the
sure.
56 concerns me more, right? You know, what is the story behind them? Are they even more serious? And it still strikes me that is this something to do with the fact that this is a workplace where drinking is part of the culture, and maybe it's time that that workplace, like many others, shouldn't have that as part of their culture.
Ed.
Well, Sue, the answer to your question is yes. This is shocking and unacceptable. The misogyny and sexism we see in our politics and, frankly, in our wider society is unacceptable. And if we're going to get rid of it, we need our leaders to lead and show that it's unacceptable. And I worry about the need to get more women into our politics, because if they see people like Angela Rayner being treated as she was, that's not going to encourage girls and women to come in to politics. And then when we read about this appalling behaviour with this Tory MP watching porn in the chamber of the House of Commons.
Ed, when you talk about leadership, this is not a problem. I mean, the porn in the House of Commons chamber, possibly, but this, in terms of sexism, misogyny, sexual misconduct, this is not something that's confined to the Conservative Party. It has been in Labour and in the Liberal Democrats.
It's over the years I've been in Parliament, it's been cross-party, and we need to grapple with it. Of course we do. But going back to what the gentleman said at the back there, I do think Boris Johnson has set a culture in his party where it's all right to break the rules. Unacceptable behaviour is okay, and you know a fish rots at the head, and you know we do need leadership on this. And if he was in a stronger moral position, if he had more integrity, I think he would be able to provide the leadership. I don't think he can.
No,
BJ.
No, well, it's their own party that's told on this person that was doing it, so they know who it is.
Yeah,
they're just holding
right.
it off, I think, cynically until after the votes that are coming on Monday, so that it won't come out in the press until later.
It's going through an independent procedure, which it would
it's
with.
going through a process, and the person who came forward was very brave doing that, because in any workplace where there's a problem, it's
Name the
important.
person, apparently. Apparently, there's two women who are aware of this, and they're too scared. For what reason? To name the person. So what does that say?
Well, no, hang on a minute. Hang on a minute. Let's get this all clear. They have named the person to the chief whip. That person is being investigated. For all parties, it goes through an independent process. So that's just the procedure, and that's what happens. BJ.
So I want to speak to two things. I think it is shocking. It is appalling. There's so many adjectives we could use. I think in recent years, there's been scandal after scandal after scandal from everyone in all different kind of parties. So I don't think any party gets to walk away from this. My wider view on misogyny at work is we need more men to take a seat at the table and actually work with women to move the dial and move the needle. There's a lot of us, if we're not involved in the scandal, we kind of just sit back, and it's going to take everyone as a society to move this forward. So I think that's where we need to start the conversation. But when it comes to Parliament in particular, that 56 MPs being investigated...
Well, it's an unconfirmed report.
Unconfirmed, but stuff like that breaks more trust in the people. I don't know how many people here feel like they trust the government, but trust is a really big thing right now.
OK, John.
Well, first of all, I agree with Sue and the point that she makes. I've been utterly appalled by what I've heard and read this week. I've been disgusted by the revelations of the last 24 hours. And look, I've got absolutely no idea who this individual is. But frankly, if the Conservative Party do know who this individual is, they should suspend this sleazebag from the Tory party. I don't understand why he's still sitting as a Tory MP. But what I think saddens me most about this is I was in Parliament 4 or 5 years ago when the Me Too movement took off, and journalists spoke out, female journalists spoke out in Parliament, MPs spoke out, staff spoke out. And we said then that enough is enough of the misogyny, the sexism, the bullying that goes on in that place. And here we are, 4 or 5 years later,
exactly right.
And nothing has changed. If anything, it has got worse. And I will be honest, though, look, what really saddens me is that should be the arena where the big issues facing all of us, from the cost of living crisis to the care homes to Ukraine, should be debated. And I think the vast, vast majority of us go into that place to do good. There'll be some of you will agree with me, some of you will think I'm talking rubbish, but I hope you all think I'm there for the right reasons, and I will agree and disagree with colleagues here, and I think everyone on this panel is there for the right reasons, and yet this is hanging over us, and it's because the place is hierarchical, and there are men who think they are entitled, who think they can get away with it. Well, it's time we all called it out and said enough is enough. We're going to challenge this behaviour because it's not welcome in our Parliament and it's not welcome in our society.
I'm going to move on to another question now from Nick Madden.
Priti Patel has come up with the idea of sending illegal immigrants crossing the channel to Rwanda in Africa. Why is this not okay? The Labour Party and the Liberal Party, and now the Archbishop of Canterbury, have still not come up with a better idea, and this has been on people's minds since about 2014.
Do you think it's a good idea?
It's a practical idea. Nobody has come up with a better idea. If I just mention my friends are Liberals and Labour supporters, I ask them regularly and they just can't come up with an idea to stop the crossings.
OK, well, now's the moment to hear, I guess. Ed?
I'm against it because it's both extremely expensive, it's going to be completely impractical and unworkable. And I just don't support things that are going to be a waste of money and just won't work.
So what would you do instead?
Well, there is a very good reason other countries do this. They have what are called safe settlement routes. To give you an example, I like the idea of giving safe routes to the UK for family reunion. When you have a child here or a parent here and they're separated and that their loved one is in another country, I think we should enable that settlement, that safe settlement, and provide a safe route for that person, for that family can be reunited.
So they would apply for asylum from another country or the country they're living in to come here?
Yeah, we have, by the way, some safe settlement schemes, so that this is not a new idea, but they've been very limited. And they could be expanded. And, you know, when I think...
Do you think that would stop the numbers? I mean, an estimated 60,000 possibly coming across the channel this year.
I think it could make a real big dent in them, because if you look at where many of the people are coming from, they're coming from northern Iraq, who are Kurds, they're coming from parts of the world where they face violence and war, and they've got relatives here. That's one of the main reasons they come here. We actually take many less asylum seekers and refugees than other countries. The ones who come here, according to the Home Office's own research, is often because they've got family links here. And I don't know about you, I think it is right for families to be together. So there's one example, sir, of a different approach that I think is more humanitarian and would work.
John?
I mean, I'm very similar to Ed. It's unworkable and it's extortionate. It's hugely expensive. I mean, they're basing it on the model they use in Australia. Well, that's going to work out at something like £1.7 million per asylum seeker, and hundreds of millions, if not billions, to settle people in Rwanda. This is a...
Do you think it would work as a deterrent?
No, I don't, actually. I mean, this is the problem. It is not going to work, and yet we're going to be spending so much money on it. And part of the reason we have a problem is because we don't have these safe settlement routes, as Ed has been talking about, but also because the Home Office is utterly failing to process asylum claims in an efficient way. We're way below the speed at which other countries do it. Our system is inefficient, and this is more of a, well, I mean, more of a gimmick in order to sort of distract the attention from all the other scandals that are being engulfed in the Prime Minister.
Would Labour's aim to be to reduce the number overall who are coming, or is that not critical?
Well, what we need to reduce is the absolutely heinous people smuggling,
sure, but in terms
which
of
is
reducing
going on.
the number of people coming overall, is that part of your policy?
That is a criminal activity. Well, of course, some of these are reflecting what's happening internationally, what's going on in the world. So, you know, we're quite rightly at the moment trying, as a nation, to take refugees from Ukraine, although the system is very bureaucratic and lots of people are struggling to actually identify people that they can take. But this system is inefficient, it's unworkable, it's more about chasing headlines than actually fixing the problem.
Mims.
So So since 2015, we've helped resettle 185,000 people from Ukraine, Afghanistan, Syria and Hong Kong. So we absolutely do our bit, and that never changes.
We take far fewer than countries like Germany, for example.
But we're a much smaller country.
Sure, but we're quite far down when it comes to other European countries.
But we do our bit, and we are standing up and helping in the way with Ukraine and with the help we're doing in Afghanistan. The gentlemen sitting either side of me, their parties have voted against the Borders Bill. It means that they voted against making people smuggling a life sentence for people caught doing it. We have to disrupt that. Last year, I think it was 28,000 people that came here. By April, we'd had 4,000 risking their lives, coming across the sea in small boats, being trafficked and being exploited. And this is part of a way of disrupting this and having those safe and suitable routes to bring people to peace, security and safety. And I'm working with the Refugees Minister to resettle and help people from Afghanistan and also from Ukraine. But what I'm also seeing is that we have got, I think it's 25,000 people who are stuck in hotels, expensive hotels. It's not a new life, it's a holding area for them. So we need to have a way
You're not suggesting sending them to Rwanda?
No, I'm saying that if you're in Dover or in Eastbourne and other areas, there are a significant amount of people that shouldn't be coming in unsafe, illegal routes. And if you look from the news from the Home Office just this week, the crossings had gone down to 0 on most days. And people in France say safe country, but we're also saying, well, actually, we're in a safe country and we're going to make our home here.
Let's hear what our audience
We are
think
trying to
of
be
this.
fair to people and to the taxpayers as well.
The woman here in the white cardie.
I'd like to say the question said we want to stop illegal immigrants. The actual policy is to stop asylum seekers. We don't know whether they're illegally or their asylum would be refused. And then the policy is for people who have gained asylum to stay in Rwanda. So I don't think anyone understands what the policy that the Conservatives are proposing. I wholly agree with Lib Dem and Labour that safe settlement routes are required, and illegal immigrants is not actually what is being proposed by the government.
And the woman next to you.
Why on earth can't we create something positive and insist that refugees work for the NHS or care? Because there's so many people that are not working for the NHS now, less doctors, less nurses, less care workers. Can't we create something positive and get these refugees to come and work for us?
Because at the moment, while they're waiting for their status to be settled, they can't work. Yeah. The man there in the jacket, yes.
Sure. The thing is, I'm really confused. I mean, I'm not agreeing with it, but I would say that, didn't Boris Johnson come to power on the back of sort of Brexit and issues of immigration and stuff? And now we're saying that actually sort of denying immigrants coming in is a bad thing, but that's pretty much what Brexit was partly about, no? So I'm really confused as to what the policy is, and everyone's now saying, oh, well, now we need to invite the immigrants in a particular way. I mean, I can't say anything. I'm obviously of Asian descent, and my parents came in and everything else, but I would just say that there's no coherency when it comes to this, and it doesn't make any sense to anyone. Is it just because the tabloids are now saying that we should allow people in through safe routes and other mechanisms and sending them to Rwanda is bad, but before we wanted to get rid of that many people coming in from Europe and saying that was just too much. So what's correct?
Okay, the woman at the very back.
Yeah, sending people to Rwanda will not address the people traffickers, and that's the point that's being lost in this completely. And to pick up on your point about
why do you think it won't? Just out of interest.
Because you need to get to the root of the people traffickers. You need to stop these people, helping these people make these crossings. These people are desperate. They want a new life. They're fleeing God knows what, and yet we want to just send them off to Rwanda, who have awful human rights. Sorry. Record, thank you.
Bejay.
Well, I'm a child of Congolese descent, for starters, and I've got family members who've seen the genocide issue in Rwanda. We've seen war in Congo. a lot of family and people I've come up, there's a background of asylum seeking. And I think the point that was raised around actually addressing people who smuggle people in and making deterrents, that is something we need to look into. But the other point that was made, which really connected with my soul, and I'm sure connected with lots of people here, which is how are we identifying who is illegal and who is actually fleeing real war? That is such a pertinent point we need to think about, as there's been so many issues that the country has not dealt with the same way they dealt with Ukraine. So when you look at Yemen, you look at Iran, you look at Taiwan, Libya, there's so many issues happening in the world that when people are fleeing and people are jumping on boats, it's not for banter, it's not funny, it's because they're trying to have a better life. And lots of us in the audience are products of people who've come here for better lives. So we need to take that into consideration.
And the policy of sending people to Rwanda?
The policy of sending people to Rwanda, that needs to be paused, and we need to do assessment around who is asylum seeking and where they're coming from. I like the safe settlement approach. We need to look into those. Other countries in Europe have created those, and they do it in much more better places. And I also think we need to look at the smugglers. Like, if people have been caught, we need to punish people.
So when people go to Rwanda, they will be supported and helped.
You can't prove that. You can't prove that. You cannot prove that.
In 2019, people from Libya were supported in Rwanda as well. So I think people are rushing to judgment without
There won't be a lot back, will they? A quick one. Rwanda is very, very, very small compared to UK. So you can't just send a bunch of people to a whole other continent, like, without looking at the structural issue.
And this was tried before. This was tried by Israel, and it failed utterly. And actually, people were in misery, and it played into the hands of the traffickers. So this idea has been tried before, and it failed. So it should not be tried, and we should provide these safe settlements. And we should, as the lady said here, this government, the Home Office, prevents asylum seekers who are looking to get refugee status from working, and it puts barriers in the way. I think people think that's utterly wrong. We should enable these people to contribute to our country. Why are the Conservatives preventing that?
Camilla.
It does seem illogical, that I do agree with Ed. The trouble is with this, it's become kind of a really toxified debate. Labour themselves came up with a scheme to process asylum seekers outside of the EU in 2003, and it was criticised by Human Rights Watch and other organisations. So successive governments have found it difficult to put the immigration genie back in the bottle. And in the debate about it, because people are afraid, because of Brexit, of expressing a concern about illegal, uncontrolled immigration and then being branded a racist or a bigot, we then can't really speak about this without being fearful of our language. The Home Office doesn't seem to have any way of defining an economic migrant who might be on a dinghy versus a refugee or an asylum seeker fleeing persecution. So we don't really have the right figures on who the people in the dinghies are and what their needs are. There is a legitimate concern from members of the British public, I think, about uncontrolled illegal immigration, and also a perfectly valid question that people are asking about why people don't think that they can seek the safe haven they need in France. You know, if somebody is in France and they aren't being persecuted, I appreciate the point of wanting to be reunited with family in the UK, but if then they are being exploited to be put on a barely inflated raft and be sent into one of the world's busiest shipping lanes simply to come to the UK when they already would have been safe in Calais, is a point of consternation for people. But unfortunately, all of the politicking that we've witnessed tonight means that we can't solve the issues because we can't even solve the language problems around this problem.
OK, let's take one more point. Yes, the woman there. Yes, yes.
I say, if the politicians who don't promote safe routes, safe and legal routes, they come illegally because you've blocked all the legal routes. If you want to stop that and you want to send people to Rwanda coming across from Calais, so you are proposing that all immigrants from Ukraine should also be going there as well, should be processed there as well, because surely people who flee Ukraine are passing through safe countries. So let's send them to Rwanda as well.
but well, most of them are ending up on in neighbouring countries. You know, Poland's taking
so
millions.
they shouldn't be able to apply here.
But that's an interesting distinction, because much has been made. Well, why are we being so generous to the Ukrainians now and not as generous to a different group of people?
They're passing through a safe country.
Yeah, we're not being generous to the Ukrainians. That's part of the problem.
Okay. But of course, whenever you're processing people coming into this country, you're going to have a list of priorities.
And what's
you're
the
going to have to be... Well, exactly. That's the whole point. That's why it's so important to categorise people. But what are you going to do right now as Mariupol is being, you know, bombarded with Russian missiles? Are you going to say to a mother and her child that she can't come because somebody else who might be already waiting in a hotel in safety in the UK takes more precedence?
Well, the point that the lady's making there is that she's going through a safe country first. So
they shouldn't be allowed to come here unless they go to Rwanda.
But it's a different scheme. I mean, Mims is more in tune with this, but it's a different, specific scheme.
Why?
That's why the government introduced the family scheme. No, but that's why the government introduced the family scheme, because it was saying to Ukrainians, if you have somebody in Britain that you want to link up with, we will have an X amount of...
I get what you're trying to say is there's a double... I get the point. You're trying to say there's a double standard here.
Yeah, I would like to take people in from Afghanistan, which you abandoned. And I'm happy to do that. But you're not offering that to Afghani people or Syrian people. You're offering it to...
OK, let's let Mims... Camilla, let's let Mims answer that.
So we are helping people from Afghanistan to resettle.
No.
Well, we are, because I'm doing it. I'm on committees and working with job centres and processing and helping people start that new life. And there's more people coming that we need to plan for as well. And of course we want people to come and settle and have that new life and that new experience. But we also need to have homes for them. We need to have jobs for them.
What about the point that's being made about the double standard?
They need in the
What about the point about the double standard, which I think is the point you're making?
There isn't a double standard. It's schemes that work. And of course we've got now a global immigration policy where we can get skills from all around the globe and welcome people. We've obviously got the new trade deals and interventions with people around the globe, because not only people in the EU have skills and abilities and want to come here.
I think that's a different thing.
But it's important. We've had 185,000 people come here since 2015 who've been settled and supported in the Hong Kong situation, where we've needed and wanted to bring them here and give them that sanctuary. That doesn't change. What we're trying to do is break the model of people smuggling, and I think letting people die in the Channel is unacceptable.
You've made that point, Mims.
Many of the points tonight.
Can I say something about my personal experience? And that's, I tried to help a friend who's got 4 girls in Afghanistan, and they're suffering under Taliban. I'm happy to offer them home and pay for them. But you don't allow that policy. So you have that policy for certain countries, certain nationalities, certain races. I am happy to accommodate, but you don't offer that route. You don't offer that safe route. I was told that if they get out, if they were smuggled out of Afghanistan and they get themselves to India, they're not allowed to come to UK, where they have family members. I'm not their family members. They have family members. But I was told by the Home Office that they can't, because India is a safe country. So they have to stay there. Why Ukrainians can't stay in the safe countries as well and not be allowed here? I just want to know the double standard.
I think we've got the answer we're going to get from the government here. We hear your point. I'm going to move on and take another question from Claire. Claire Still.
I'm not a big user of Twitter, as in my opinion it's sort of a lot of woke people. Do you not think it is a good thing that Elon is advocating a free speech platform which will enable more people to express their views without being cancelled or silenced?
I like the way you call him Elon, like it's your mate or something. Elon Musk. OK. Not a big user of Twitter, it's full of woke people. Right. Is that you, Bejay?
That's for the people to decide, really, right?
Do you think it's a good thing that he's advocating it as a free speech platform?
So I've read a couple articles over the last couple of days that kind of counter what he said and the times that he's actually not advocating for free speech. And then you can read stuff where he has. I think humans are complex, you know? We evolve, we change. Who we were 3 years ago is not who we are today. I think on a business level, Twitter has struggled to keep up with the pace that TikTok and Meta and other companies have kind of grown. So the business model behind the actual brand isn't as innovative as it was. So I think it's refreshing that a new leader will come in and kind of take the business and innovate. He's proven to innovate. He created.
Do you think he's the right person to do it?
Potentially, it's not for me. It's the market. It's for the market to decide. He did it with PayPal. He's done it with Tesla. He's done it with SpaceX. I think for me, the bigger point that I think about when I think about the takeover is the fact that we don't have to be on a platform. If he takes over and he doesn't do right, we can leave. It's not mandatory for us to be on a platform. So once we get on that platform, right now it's not working. There's been so many people who have not been cancelled and have managed to stay and kind of push their agenda. There's people who haven't. So it's not working the way it's currently working. So we need some changes. And I think the people and the market will ultimately decide if Elon's takeover is successful.
John?
Well, there is a question as to whether, if he does succeed with his attempt to take over, whether what he wants to do with Twitter is compatible with what Nadine Dorries wants to do with social media, with the online harms bill, which he is attempting to bring in, or will be bringing in very soon. So he might not be able to do what he wants to do in the United Kingdom. Yes, we should use social media for free speech, but there do have to be standards enforced. And I remember things have improved, but I remember it was only a few years ago that some of my parliamentary colleagues were subjected to the most horrendous anti-Semitic, misogynist abuse on Twitter. That is unacceptable, and that shouldn't be allowed. I also know, and I think there have been improvements now, but I remember 3 or 4 years ago when I was in the health spokesperson for my party, there were a lot of problems, particularly with teenagers, often female teenagers, but not exclusively, who were able to find, either bullied on social media, which caused various different mental health problems, or if they were young people who were suffering, sadly, from some form of eating disorder, were able to find content on social media which made the circumstances in which they were in much worse. Actually, as it happens, the big tech companies have improved on that front now. The point being is you cannot simply have a free-for-all on social media any more than I can shout fire in this room now and cause mass panic. Standards have to be applied and people have to behave responsibly on social media.
Ed?
I've got good news for you, Claire, and less good news for Elon Musk. Twitter isn't as important as he thinks. I agree. When I've been going out knocking on doors during these elections, no one mentions what they heard on Twitter. They mention what matters to them, like the cost of living and so on. So that's the first point. The second point, I'm a liberal. I strongly believe in free speech, but I'm also a Democrat. And I don't think the rules on free speech should be outsourced to the world's richest man. I think it should be decided by elected politicians in Parliament and governments who are accountable for those decisions. As John was saying, there is some irresponsible free speech. For example, if you incite people to violence, that's against the law at the moment. Parliaments have decided that that's an abuse of free speech. Is Elon Musk going to allow that? So I don't want to outsource the global conversation, the rules around free speech, just because he's the richest man. That's not right. It's not democratic.
OK, let's hear our audience has got to say. Yes, you in the front in the black top.
I found it interesting that you said that Twitter isn't a very important thing. I think it's extremely important, the power that it holds these days. It can influence, the whole US election was, you could argue, was influenced by Twitter. I also like the sort of voting with your feet, go to a different platform. I think the danger with Twitter now is that it's so big that you can try and branch off and make a different platform, like Donald Trump. I think he tried to make his own sort of Twitter. It's so big that I think it's here to stay, and so whoever's controlling it has a massive amount of power with sort of the information that we get fed. So Elon buying it is a very sort of important thing. Which way will he lead it? Because obviously now people are thinking that's going to move more right-wing. But I think Twitter is an extremely important part of society at sort of the town hall of the people to influence public opinion, and maybe it should be sort of considered more by MPs and government at how powerful it can be for your election campaigns.
OK. Man here in the jacket.
Yeah. Like, we live in a capitalist system. Let the market decide. I don't think Elon, being the richest man in the world, has anything to do with it. He's made a bid. they've accepted the bid, and ultimately he's got proven track record of success. So if he's got plans, we've just got to look at what he's done previously and say, well, is this the sort of person that we feel can actually deliver on what he's saying? And I think he can. So let's let the market decide.
Okay. I love the way you're all calling him Elon. like we're all bezies with Elon. Claire, you asked the question. What do you think?
I'd like to explain what I meant a bit more. I meant not bullying on Twitter. That's got, we can't have that bullying or inciting hate. What I mean is being able to voice an opinion on something without being cancelled or shouted down. Even my daughter said to me, if you get picked for a question tonight, Mum, you better not ask it in case people talk about you on the internet. That's the kind of behaviour I think Elon Musk, hopefully we could now go forward and be able to have an opinion and disagree with somebody, and they can disagree with me without being cancelled.
Yeah, and that will be my experience tonight. Going online, I've thought about leaving Twitter more times than I've had dinners. I like to broadcast and say what I'm thinking, what I'm doing. But if you want to see misogyny, hate and unpleasantness in the bucket loads, go on Twitter tonight after being on this programme. And that's what puts off women coming into politics and standing up what they believe in. So, think about what you're saying to people, anybody. So that is a free space to say what you want.
I don't want to be scared
online
to give
harms
an
bill.
opinion, and I am scared to say stuff more than I was 10 years ago now.
Yeah, and we
anything.
shouldn't be...
And are you concerned about the fact that Elon Musk is now in charge of Twitter?
So, well, at the end of the day, if he's going to sort out the bots and the unpleasantness, then, let's give him a chance. But, well, how do we know?
Because he says he's an absolutist.
Well, he has talked about he wants to get rid of the bots.
But he's also talked about a responsibility. Well, let's see, with great power comes responsibility. So let's see that and let's see as it goes through. But I think we all have a responsibility in social media, because nothing more unsocial than social media. But the online harms bill is coming, and it's got to get things right in the way that some of the things that Jonathan described as well. And I think it's really important that we catch up with this legislation and tackle it head on. And anybody who's going to send hateful, unpleasant stuff tonight, think about it, put your phone down and go to bed.
Amen to that. Eggs make the point that, it's going to be controlled by one of the world's leading billionaires. It already was. The internet is controlled by the world's leading billionaires, and they're almost all exclusively men, which might explain some of the misogyny. I would say this to you, Claire, and others. Sometimes people are cancelled on social media. Social media publishes with impunity. It's not regulated, and often it's a sewer. If you want diversity of opinion, buy a newspaper.
Oh, no self-interest there at all, Camilla.
No, but we need them.
The good thing about newspapers is some opinions are expressed, and you might not agree with them.
I'm not a big Twitter user. That's how I started my question.
Okay, all right.
There's a place for debate in this country, but I would suggest it is perhaps in newspapers rather than online.
Or can I say on this programme? So let's hear some of it. Yes, you there in the black top.
About setting standards on social media, who do you believe should set those standards? The politician that was caught at a party, or any other leaders involved?
Oh my gosh, we've come full circle. We've got time just for one more comment. Yes, William.
I actually sympathise with the lady who raised the question. I think in society as a whole, there's a real cancel culture problem. I'm at sixth form at the moment. I would not express certain views because I fear that I would be shut down or silenced. I'm very cautious about that. I think that's a real problem. And on Twitter, same thing. If I tread a certain way, I think it really has terrible implications for people who just want to explore different opinions and want to respectfully debate. Of course, terrible, extreme opinions, racism, sexism, etc., should not be permitted, but civil opinions, as a sixth form student, I feel like I can't express or those opinions with others without having some sort of massive backlash or being silenced.
Yeah, let's disagree well. Let's do that. That's the easy way, isn't it?
Let's disagree. Let's disagree without being disagreeable.
Absolutely.
That's the thing I was always told as a child. Our hour is up, so the end of agreements and disagreements in total. Thank you very much, the panel, for coming along this evening and for making all your points. Thank you very much to our audience here in Romford. Great to see you. Really appreciate you coming along this evening. And of course, to you at home, thank you very much for watching Question Time this evening. No doubt this conversation will carry on Twitter, on whatever else it might continue. But for now, from Question Time in Romford, good night.